hey, I have Amanda Kay. She is a wedding photographer out of Oregon, down in, I'm going to get it wrong,
Medford,
Medford. Thank
Southern
you.
Oregon.
Just north of
Yeah.
Ashland.
Yes.
And she is a film photographer. We have worked together over the years, and she does beautiful, amazing work. She does some work in Oregon, but oftentimes you'll find her traveling the world, and you can find those stories and adventures on Instagram. And we're kind of jumping right into the middle of a conversation and talking about a wedding that she did in Colombia, and talking about things that she learned, things the couple learned, and hopefully, if you're a couple wanting to have a destination wedding and you want to hire a film photographer, Amanda's a great option. So feel free to join in on the conversation. So we're talking about you did it's today we're in the
Yeah.
middle of coronavirus. We're talking
Yeah.
about a wedding that you did down in Colombia back in
February.
February. Okay.
Yeah. So it was literally days before all of this happened. All of this went down. In fact, on our way there, and on our way there, we were stopped through, going through customs. Actually, as we were deplaning, they had, it looked like, something out of a sci-fi movie. They had about 12 people in like hazmat suits and digital thermometers. And every person that was exiting the plane, we had to have our temperature
Oh, so
taken as we were entering.
you were right at the start of Corona.
Yes, exactly. Right at the start. And we were like, what in the world is going on? Obviously I'm like, holy smokes, like little overreaction perhaps. Little did I know. But yeah, so thankfully, and so that was a fear right away. I'm like, what in the world would I have done if I had had a low grade fever? Never in a million
Mhm.
years is that something that would have ever crossed my mind. I pride myself in preparing for everything in every scenario, but there's always one that just jumps in that you just don't foresee and you can't plan for, and you have to, think on your feet. And my thought was, okay, so worst case scenario, let's say I had a fever and they put me in quarantine for 14 days and I can't photograph this wedding. So my second shooter is there. She would end up having to do it. So that's why I always, travel with someone, always have a backup plan just in case, something happens to me or whatever. So anyway, that being said, it was the very beginning of the whole thing. And then coming back, the same thing. Having to go through customs again, having your temperature taken.
Mhm.
Thankfully, I didn't have a fever. So yeah, it was quite an adventure. So it was the very beginning of that, and that is the last wedding I've had the opportunity to shoot since all this happened.
Oh
So
my gosh.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I want to talk more about that. We're just going to
yeah.
leave coronavirus off this. So
Okay,
even though it's
perfect.
happening at that time, I don't want to make this about the coronavirus. I want this
No,
to just
okay,
be helpful to people. That could be a whole nother talk,
yes,
but let's talk
for
about
sure.
Colombia. Had you ever shot in Colombia before?
No, this was my first opportunity to go to South America to shoot a wedding. So I was very excited about it. Really incredible couple. They found me through a feature, I believe through Brides
Hmm.
magazine. And the bride's sister had also hosted her wedding there 2 years prior. And so they knew that they wanted their wedding there, but they wanted to hire a different vendor team,
Hmm.
just so their experience is different. And so we had been communicating for about, oh my goodness, typically a destination wedding is about 15 to 18 months prior. So there's so much to plan. We had been building up to this incredible wedding for months, a lot of communication, and it was one I was really really looking forward to. So,
And what are some things? So you just said you said 18 months, right? Give or take.
correct.
And then
Yeah.
you said there's a lot of things to plan. What are some
Uh-huh.
things that come to mind for you in terms of like, hey, this takes a while? What are all the things
Sure.
that come into play?
Yeah. So the logistics, especially for a location or country that I've never been
Hmm.
before, first we start researching, work permits, or Europe, like visas. If there's going to be anything that is going to, cause any issues at the border,
Hmm.
specifically, traveling to Colombia was also something I really researched a lot prior to committing to this wedding, because you always hear horror stories of Colombia. But I was in Cartagena, which is, one of the safest areas,
Yeah.
air quotes, safest areas in Colombia. And, and obviously this amazing couple hosting their very large 300 guest destination wedding. They're actually based in California. So I knew that, they weren't going to invite 300 of their nearest and dearest, if they felt it wasn't, something safe for everyone.
Yeah.
So it's a trust thing there too, trusting them. They travel there often, like with the bride grew up traveling there for vacations with her family. So she knew it really well. So having those conversations, giving me peace of mind and knowing that, obviously this is something I'm really excited to jump into. And then obviously the logistics of their wedding was that they had their welcome party, and then they had this beach day planned, which was something that they had a yacht. And so there were 300 guests and myself and my second shooter and a video team. We all were on. It was a whole day adventure of photographing this amazing party on the beach, separate from, Cartagena, and it was a 3-hour boat ride. And so all of those things, all those logistics planning, and having conversations, we did a lot of video chats, talking about, their expectations and, what was the most important thing for me to capture.
What did they say?
So, yeah, for them, it was the culture. The location, telling the story of the location was huge. Obviously, which is really big for me as well, is their family.
How do you? I'm gonna jump in so much. How do you? So they said culture, location. How do you interpret that to how then you shoot?
Okay, yeah, great question. So when I travel to a location, a destination, whether it's stateside or international, I always like to fly in about 2 to 3 days prior to any event that I'm shooting. So that gives me an opportunity. I do a lot of research as well online about the area, the history behind it, the architecture, maybe some really incredible spots that the couple loves. Specifically, it's nostalgic for them. A lot of times, they've traveled there before and they've had a photo of themselves there from 5 years ago, and would love something like that, that kind of a thing. So doing the research and then arriving early gives me a chance to really scout the area. And so I usually dedicate an early morning, which is what we did there, because it's like threshold of hell hot in Cartagena. Like, not even joking. It was 88 degrees with 90% humidity. So it's brutal hot. And
something
then
we don't deal with here in the Pacific Northwest.
Exactly. And that is something, that's a whole nother topic of conversation too, is being able to shoot in that type of heat and humidity. It's very tricky, especially with film. However, backtrack. So early morning, with the best light, just walking around and shooting the environment when there's not as many people around. It's a very beautiful city, so much history behind it. They got married in this 16th century church. So I took a lot of photos of the church. That's important to them. And then just the locals, kind of doing their thing, walking around. Obviously what they're known for is coffee. So shooting some, coffee shops and things. So just kind of creating and collecting images to just really tell the whole story as a whole of where we were. It's not just about the wedding day, but it's about the whole experience and why they chose that location. So
it's almost like pre-wedding, you're putting on this editorial hat, and it's almost like you've been commissioned by Sunset Magazine to say, yes, hey, we need a 3-page spread on Colombia, go.
Exactly.
And you're almost just interweaving that into,
yes.
I mean, you're there before the wedding even starts, so
Correct.
Would that sum it up? Like if I were to flip through a magazine, it's like photos by Amanda Kay, 3-page spread on Colombia. It'd be like, oh, the way those things make me feel.
Right. Exactly. And what I want, kind of my perspective of it too is trying to photograph everything as if I were a guest experiencing it. So it may be a guest that has been there for the very first time, like myself, it being
Hmm.
my first time. It's like so awe-inspiring. And every corner that you turn, it's like, wow, this is the most beautiful place. So obviously my excitement is behind every image I shoot. So my hope is as the couple looks through that, they're going to look at that and be like, okay, that is an amazing experience we provided our guests. And seeing it through Amanda's eyes, hopefully that's how our guests saw it as well. And as well as it gives my couples an opportunity to have, other photos from their wedding that isn't just themselves and
Yeah.
people, beautiful art that they can put on their wall and know that that was from their wedding weekend. Um, yeah.
Interesting. I didn't
So
think
it's
about
just,
that.
yeah. Yeah. So just some, fine art of
Fine art that
Colombia.
isn't attached to
Yeah,
their wedding, but is special because it was right around that time. Yeah.
exactly. It's associated with probably their happiest, most joyful weekend they've ever experienced thus far. However, it's still something just really beautiful that displays the area that they feel connected to forever.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
yeah,
the average person, if they walked into their house and saw it, they just think, "Wow, that's just a beautiful print."
right,
And
exactly.
then they're thinking, "Yes, that is a beautiful print, and that's where we got married. That was a town. That's really cool."
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
You said
for sure.
something. You said Cambodia was your first time, so you're going there. You're seeing it the same way a guest would be seeing it. If you walk around the corner and you see some beautiful architectural feature, you're just like, "Oh my gosh!" Can you
Right.
speak? I've often talked to couples, and sometimes it's funny because couples see it as a plus, saying, "Oh, have you shot there before?" They see that as a plus, and that is a
True.
good thing. There are great things that come along with it, but I
Mhm.
also think it's a great plus if you've never been there. And yes, you might have to do a little bit more legwork, but do couples ever have that kind of feeling of like, oh, we want somebody to shoot there, but how do you handle that if you say, hey, I've never shot there, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing? That could actually be a positive.
Yeah. Such a great question, and I love this conversation because that is true. I think a lot of couples will base their decisions on somebody that has experience in a
Mm-hmm.
certain location or a venue specifically. How my approach to it is if I haven't been there before, it's it fuels me because it gives me an opportunity to see everything for the first time. And I think I photograph things a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit more excitement behind it and um, a little more creativity, perhaps, as well. When you're shooting the same venue, 3 times a year, you kind of become lackadaisical, for lack of better words, in that, okay, I've shot this venue before, it's the same thing, we'll get this shot. This is where we do this is where we do that for the best light, so on and
Mm-hmm.
so forth. When it's a new location, I am constantly scouting, always scouting. And couples will even send me ideas. Hey, Amanda, this is what I've seen there. I've seen this couple have this photo there. And I usually say, I'm going to do just the opposite of that then, because I like to have something new and fresh and creative. Um, and allowing them to see it through my eyes as well and not just base on what everybody else is doing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I think it's more inspiring for me and more exciting for me personally to shoot at a location I've never shot before, and it allows me even more time to just capture the whole experience even more so.
That's an interesting thing. It's so funny because I can think of a lot of great photographers, and I'll see some work,
Right.
in an area that I know, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, the way that they went about capturing that is just mind blowing. And it's funny
Yes,
because
exactly.
couples then want that experience,
Right.
but if you think about it, that couple who got that experience got it by saying, yes, we're going to break the mold. Yes, we're not going to follow the
Exactly.
path, but now the new
Right.
couple wants it by following the path. And it's like, no, you could have your
Right.
own thing. It doesn't
Yeah.
feel as safe, but the payoff could
Right.
be huge.
Exactly. Exactly. And now that you've got my mind thinking about like this specific wedding,
Hmm.
one thing too that can always be challenging is working with, well, first of all, working with planners, that you've never worked with before,
Hmm.
that love to give a lot of input and suggestion,
Yeah.
in air, and they're doing their job, and that's
Hmm.
so fantastic. And I love that. And it's so important to have that communication with the planner, um, well in advance of the wedding day. That's really important,
And just
especially in
out
a
of curiosity,
destination.
was this planner
Yeah,
down in Cambodia or Colombia?
Columbia. Yeah,
They
correct.
were
So
local down there.
they were local,
Okay.
and that ended up being one of the things that the bride and groom and I have since discussed a little bit. That in hindsight, I think they feel it would have better served everyone to have had an American based, U.S. based planner there for their wedding, specifically for certain parts of it,
Okay.
for a lot of reasons. But
I want to dive into that. Do you want to do that
yeah,
now or do you want to wait?
sure,
You were heading
sure. No,
somewhere else. I interrupted you.
I got
You go.
sidetracked.
No, you go where you were going.
Story of my life.
You go where you were
Yeah,
going.
yeah. So as far as the planners go, having that community. Oh, okay, yes,
You were talking about location. Sometimes planners put input on that.
exactly. Sometimes you put input in that, as well as then their communication with the couple. Okay, so couples don't understand, sometimes the process of allowing the photographer to have um, the freedom to shoot and kind of guide and direct where everything should be photographed.
Hmm.
Some planners really like to give a lot of input in that
Hmm.
based on where the location is or their culture as well. Um, their communication is just a little bit different in how they communicate. And this is how things are done there, and this is where you shoot, and this is how it should be. And so it can feel it can put a little pressure on the couple um, in advance, where they're like, I'm trying to communicate this correctly, but
Yeah.
as they go into it thinking, okay, this is where we need to have things done, especially if I've never been there before.
Hmm.
So when I arrive, I have new ideas. And so communicating that with them, saying, when I arrive 2 days prior, things might change on this timeline
Yeah.
based on where I think is best to shoot. And they're investing a lot of money in their vendors, in me, in their entire wedding, the whole experience. They are best served if they can just put their trust in their team
Hmm.
that they bring in to kind of take control of where the photos are happening
Yeah.
based on light, regardless of. So in Colombia, most of their photography style there is digital. Well, all of it is digital, and it's a little bit more, kind of the dark and moody style, a
Okay.
little more contrasty shooting with, really wide angle lenses,
Hmm.
in my, obviously they hired me
Hmm.
for the fine art look, for film, and for my eye and my perspective and seeing things through, my lens. So this couple particularly were incredible in that they just put their complete trust in me, and allowed me to really take the lead there. But on wedding day, it ended up being a lot more challenging than we all anticipated, based on just the lack of um, communication there between the planner and myself. There wasn't a lot, based on just kind of their. And let me backtrack a little bit. So this planner, I don't know if I should talk about this or not.
I know, I get it. I get
Maybe
it.
we
It's this
should
fine
skip. Maybe we
line.
should skip. Yeah, maybe we should skip this part.
So why don't we skip
Yeah.
over that? Do you feel like it would be
Okay.
natural to jump to the fact of saying, hey, because
Yeah.
I never even thought about that. So something that a couple should
Yeah.
consider is, hey, if you get married somewhere, destination,
Right.
especially outside the US, you have the
Right.
option of going local or bringing somebody in. And in my
Correct.
mind, I would think, man, that'd be really tough to have a US based wedding planner plan a wedding down in Colombia, lacking connections, lacking all those things that.
Sure. Sure.
So talk to me about, like, if I was a couple getting married, that would be my immediate thought. My immediate thought would get somebody local who
Right. Right.
interfaces well with US couples and has all the connections to rentals, locations, venues, customs, all that stuff. But what you're
Right.
saying is you might want it. Well, go ahead. What's your
Yeah.
thought?
Yeah. So based on, this previous experience in
Hmm.
Colombia, the couple and I had a little bit of a little conversation. I always, we always like to have kind of a debriefing. I like to do that with my couples
After the wedding.
after the wedding,
Yeah.
correct. About 2 weeks after, post honeymoon, and just there's just a lot, going on after the wedding as well. But just to do a debriefing while everything's still fresh in their mind and everything is fresh in my mind, and saying, hey, what could I have done different, me particularly, to have made the experience better for you? And could I have served you better in other areas? Is there anything we could have done different leading up to it? Right.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure the next destination wedding, these are things that might come up that I didn't realize, we're going to come up at this wedding.
Mm-hmm.
So in our conversation, basically, they felt that they had failed, in that they wish they had a US based planner alongside the planner that they hired locally, because they obviously need that there specifically,
Okay.
for, florals and catering and just organizing everything. And this was a very large wedding. This wasn't a small intimate wedding. So they needed a whole team. So if they had hired and brought along another just day of, or 2 days, or 3 or 4, whatever, US based planner as well, to just manage the US based teams that were there, video
Mm-hmm.
and photography, just to kind of be the liaison and that person in between. Because there were a lot of things going on, and it was difficult to communicate. Not just because of the language barrier, but just culturally, it's just different.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Certain tasks can be done locally.
Correct.
And then it'd be
exactly.
good to outsource certain other tasks to a
Exactly.
local, to a US based planner. And then you have
Exactly.
somebody running interference between a local planner and their desires
Right.
and what you want. Because at the
Right.
moment, that planner was coming straight to
Exactly.
you or straight to the couple.
Straight to the couple.
Okay, that's tough on a wedding day. Yeah.
Yes, very tough on the wedding day. And when they would come directly to me, or I would go directly to them. And see, here's the thing: is this wedding? There were things taking place in 3 different locations, which is always the most challenging.
How so? So ceremony location, reception location, and what's the third?
And so getting ready,
Okay,
getting ready location.
Ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they had 2 houses that they had rented in the city, and then they had a hotel room where the bride ended up getting ready, which is where they stayed the night of the wedding, which happened to be the hotel I was staying in. So that was very convenient.
Yeah.
There was from there we did portraits up on the rooftop area. From there, we ended up going to the reception venue for a few photos. From the reception venue was the church. And then from the church, we were actually escorted by walking. It's a lot like a New Orleans celebration. Afterwards, there's all these Colombian dancers and musicians, and they escort us all walking to the reception venue.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of moving parts that day. And so, for instance, the bride and groom had a location at the hotel that they really desired to have their grand reveal together. I scouted it. It was beautiful. I spoke with the front desk. Hey, this is where the concierge, this is where the couple wants to do these. Okay, so let me talk to this person. That person didn't get back to me. I talked to the planner. The planner was, they communicated, but there was a miscommunication.
Mm-hmm.
And there was already a ceremony happening in that location, which we didn't learn until the morning of the wedding. So we had to have plan B. So I'm, racing to figure out what that's going to be, because, Colombia is, the city itself in Cartagena is tight. It's a lot like, Europe, really narrow streets. So there's not a lot of, wide open areas. So long story short, we ended up, going to the rooftop, and then I'm working with, which you'll appreciate, a video team that, there's 5 of them. So there's several on their team. And the planner also had her own set of photographers that were photographing things for her specifically. So these
Did the couple
were
know this? That's a
No,
lot of people with
that's a
cameras. How
lot.
many did
That's
the
a lot of
videographer
people.
have?
She had 3 photographers,
Oh, the
and
planner had three. The videographer had
of her own.
five,
Yes, correct. And I didn't
eight,
realize, and we had no
nine.
idea this was going to happen.
Oh man.
So it was challenging, overwhelming for the couple. So that's part of it that, in hindsight, now I know going
You need
in.
to make a checklist for couples saying that'd be
Yes,
one of the things. Like find out how many people are on your video, and they probably knew that.
for sure,
But
for
how many
sure. And this is
people are on the planning
exactly,
team?
exactly. And most of the video team did not speak English. So it was very difficult for me. And being spatially aware is so important.
Yeah.
We're all there, we're supposed to be there as a team. This is for the couple. So there shouldn't be, competing for space. So that posed a really huge challenge, especially during the ceremony as well, this big church. And this video team didn't shoot with long lenses. They're right up front.
So just to
So
interpret that, so
yeah,
when you say that the
yeah,
team didn't shoot with long lenses, essentially what that means
yeah.
is they have to be closer to the couple, which then
Correct,
forces you to be closer to the couple, or
correct.
you're gonna have a whole
Yes,
lot of editing to do.
correct.
Yeah.
Yep, all of the above. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that posed a challenge, for sure.
It's
And
amazing.
then
It's amazing
yeah,
hearing all this because I'm sure if I saw the gallery, I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, those photos are amazing." And a couple would think, "Oh, it's just it all came with ease," and it sounded like a
right,
battle
right. Oh, it was.
just to
It
get,
was.
and I
Yeah.
don't I'm sure we haven't even heard the half of it yet, but it's just amazing. I think it
Oh yeah, that's a whole podcast in and of itself. Is the story of Colombia.
Oh my god.
For sure. And then I
Well,
lost my
this has got
second
to be the trailer then.
to food poisoning. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the middle of the day, I lost my second shooter to food poisoning. So that posed another challenge. So another lesson learned for me. This is the first time that's ever happened. So yeah.
Which you plan for it though.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, for sure. And in hindsight, I think, obviously you don't foresee, anything like that. And anything like that can happen to
Yeah.
any of us at any time.
Yep.
And that's, always the risk you take, where it's just part of being human. So in hindsight, for me, going into that wedding, I would have had a team of 3 of us, 2 second shooters for this wedding,
Makes sense.
just in case,
Yeah.
type of thing. Obviously I was able to finish the wedding, by myself. And it got down to, and at this point it was reception. So everything else prior to that, where we needed to shoot, divide and conquer, that was
Mhm.
already handled. So thankfully, it was best case scenario for that to happen. But so lesson learned there for sure too.
Let's talk about that real quick. Let's talk about the
Yeah.
fact that on paper it seems simple, like, hey, come down and shoot
Right.
my wedding in Colombia. It'll be,
Right.
a 1 or 2 day
Right.
event. And
Right.
somebody could see that it's just really simple. You'll show up, one, maybe 2 people. But talk to me about
Hmm.
essentially you're running the risk of there's all these variables, especially some
Hmm.
that are a lot of them are out of your control. Customs, illness, like
Right.
travel,
Right.
flights,
Exactly.
planes, conditions, what
Right.
all these things that come into play.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Obviously, you can't control those, but how do you kind of build your day up and build your plan up to protect against those things, so that even if they do penetrate and a second shooter gets taken out by illness or whatever it is, how do you make it so that
Right.
you can just keep going?
Yeah. So I think just from experience, in life too, right? You're on your journey of the wedding day and you have these, best case scenarios and worst case scenarios. So I always, run through those in my mind of what could
Mhm.
happen. And destination weddings specifically are very challenging in that there are so many variables. Especially, with shooting film, we have to hand check all the film every time we go through a scanner or through customs. And there's, usually like 5 different scanners we have to go through to get there. So I plan ahead for that. We make sure all the film is shucked and in baggies and easy and ready for them to, hand check. And you get a lot of dirty looks from people behind you.
So
And Yeah.
let me interpret this a little bit. So you're saying as a film
Okay.
photographer, you're literally
Yeah.
showing up with canisters of film and they're in
Yes.
bags, and you're saying you take them out of the bags, you prep them, and whereas me as a videographer, I can just run straight through security. They throw my bag
Correct.
through the X-ray machine. You're saying no, we can't do that with my gear. So you have
Correct.
to be the person who kind of gets the pat down.
Yes.
You slow everything
Yes.
down. They check your gear, and then you're saying if you're
Yes.
going to Cambodia or Colombia, you're doing that 5 times.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So you
So,
really have to protect the film just to get it to the
yes.
location and then to get it back.
Exactly. So
Okay.
unexposed film specifically is vulnerable.
Gotcha.
So I can't put film like through my checked bags. Those scanners will ruin it.
Interesting.
So through the TSA, the security checkpoints, so shucking the film, so it's medium format, so it comes in like little foil coverings, and so we
Mm-hmm.
have to shuck each piece, each roll of film, and it's usually, we bring on average 100 rolls of medium format film and some 35 millimeter.
Yeah.
And TSA takes them in rows of 10. And then they put another row of 10. And then they put another row of 10. And then they hand check each one. They swipe each. So 100 rolls of film, they are hand checking. Yeah. So I have to plan
Oh,
well in advance and get there, especially early, knowing, and sometimes there's no possible way for them to hand check it, and that's okay. It's not going to necessarily ruin it, but the least amount of times it goes through the scanner, the better. Coming back, it's not as worrisome, and it has to be, and it can't be anything above an 800 ISO. So anything above that has to be hand checked, otherwise it will be ruined.
I
But
wonder what couples must be
so,
thinking as you're saying some of these things. Shucking,
I
800
know,
ISO. Pretty
sorry,
much the
sorry.
takeaway is
We're
if you
getting
hire a
so
film
technical.
photographer, if you
Yeah,
hire a film photographer, you better
sure.
get somebody who knows what they're doing because they need to take a lot of
Yes.
care to execute this and have it work out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a lot of preparation, and it's a major headache. I've had it happen coming back from Italy, where the Italian lady flat out refused to hand check my film. She just about faced me, and I'm like, okay, so I think I'm just going to send it through. And fortunately it was after the wedding and it was fine. I've never, had any film ruined through a scanner. But they are changing the scanners now to a much higher potency. So
Hmm.
it's becoming now in most of the major airports in the U.S. You have to hand check your phone. So that being said, moving on to your original question, once then, we as far as preparing for destination weddings specifically,
Hmm.
I think that was your main question. Sorry,
Yeah,
I got
yeah.
sidetracked.
No, no, no.
Yeah, is as well as, you know um, all of the locations. Like I've
Hmm.
never, especially if it's an area I've never been before. Mapping out, every day where this Uber is going to take us. Do they have Uber? Do they take American cash? Do they only take cards? So we got to make sure we have the correct currency to get
Hmm.
where we need to go. Um, figuring out there's no, obviously you don't want to have to use your data there. So figuring out Wi-Fi spots, and then I purchase like a little Wi-Fi hotspot to take with me in case
Hmm.
I'm in a location where I can't reach anyone. Preparing for that. Bringing meds. I actually bring meds in case I do contract some sort of stomach virus, to where, it protects me from that. And it's funny because I was talking to my second shooter recently about couples, don't even, probably don't even understand the prep I go through, excuse me, just physically. I physically prepare myself through boosting my immunity, staying healthy. I don't, take risks by, skiing in the winter, or, doing things like that where I can like break a wrist or an ankle. I do things with the mindset of like, is this taking a risk? Is this putting my couple at risk to where I wouldn't be able to perform my job?
Yeah.
So a lot of things like that. And traveling in general, even before the coronavirus, is risky, to get sick. And so I, take care of myself daily, trying to continue to just do my job well physically too. It's very physically demanding, and then
Yeah.
acclimating to like Colombia especially is so incredibly hot. And shooting in the heat is like next level difficult. And figuring out how to stay hydrated, and being careful what you eat, and so it's not as glamorous as people think. Getting there, it's not like I'm on vacation and I'm just enjoying myself. I'm there working and making sure, that I am doing everything I possibly can to stay alive and do my job well. So
So you're not just like drinking Mai Tais
yeah.
on the beach with a sun
No.
hat on Google Maps,
No.
like cruising the
Yeah,
streets.
exactly. That's the day after. The day
Oh
after is
my
always
gosh.
delegated to myself doing absolutely nothing, and having, a lovely cocktail somewhere. So yeah, as in celebration of making it through.
And this is
So
where you say, I love my job, right?
yes,
Right? So
exactly.
why do you do this? Why are you a wedding photographer?
Oh my
Not
goodness,
saying that we just do
that's
things that
such
are
a great
easy,
question.
but
Yeah, yeah. No, there's nothing easy about being a wedding photographer. What I love most about my job truly is the connections, the people. I love people. I love hearing stories about how they found each other. I love hearing about their families, their journeys. It, doing destinations specifically too, and all over the United States has actually given me the opportunity to travel places I've never been
mhm.
and otherwise might not have. And then just being able to experience that and photograph it and journal that for them, and really capturing, hopefully, just the true essence of them as a couple and as their celebration. There's really nothing I love more. It really is something that I feel is good for my soul. Like, it's just being around joy and celebration and love. I mean, how can it not infiltrate you, right? So that's what I love most about it. And weddings in general are a lot of times, couples' best day ever, right? As they say. And being a part of that and experiencing it, is really, really, a gift. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's funny thinking about like best day ever. It's
Yeah.
a wedding is, if I think back to my own wedding, the amount of people that we had all in one location, that will probably
Yeah.
not happen again
Not
until my funeral.
exactly.
Like, it's weird to say it, but
Exactly.
like, and
Right.
if you take the wedding out of it, you're just throwing the biggest party for your closest friends and family. I mean, it's so many things, and it's celebratory, and there's all these amazing moments that will just not naturally happen in your day to day life.
It's
Your
true.
dad's not going to give
Exactly.
up. Your dad probably
Right.
doesn't give you a speech every Monday morning about how much he
Right.
loves you and how he raised you
Right.
and
Yeah.
all these things.
That's one of my favorite parts of the wedding day are the speeches. You get to know your couples for a year, through the engagement session and video chats like this.
Mm-hmm.
But the opportunity to listen to their best friends and their family and their dads and their moms and telling stories about these couples and these people, it's so inspiring. I always leave inspired. I'm like, wow, like, these are incredible people. They're so loved, and it's just, um, I don't know. I love hearing about their lives and their accomplishments and their characteristics. And yeah, it's just, it's one of my favorite parts of the wedding day, actually. And I'm usually just kind of standing there listening and shooting a little bit, but it's something I actually get to kind of be a part of too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'm going to say this. I feel like this is such a good point to wrap it up. I feel like this is a
Okay.
great bite-sized piece of content, especially if somebody's just trying to wet their whistle on what does it look like to have a destination wedding? What does it look like to hire a film photographer? And it kind of pulls back the curtain a little bit and shows what a film photographer goes through. So if you're talking with Amanda Kay, if you're talking with somebody else, hopefully you're now a bit more educated on the process, to make a decision, because you only get one chance at it. And we want it to be a good one for you. And we want you to have a good experience and end up with great photos. If you want to reach out to Amanda Kay, you can reach out to her at her website at Amanda K Photo Art. art.com.
Yep.
But hopefully you enjoyed this. Amanda K is a good book, and you just got the preface on it. There's so much more to her story of why she's in photography. But if I open that up, we'd double the length of this podcast.
Yeah.
So thanks for tuning in. Hopefully this is helpful to you. If you're watching this on YouTube, there'll be links below to her work and anything like that. And yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.